I wasn't supposed to be away for Mark's birthday. It was a business trip I simply couldn't get out of. A conference that had been on the calendar for months, long before we even thought about his 40th. I felt a pang of guilt every time I looked at my plane ticket. 40 is a big one, a milestone. You're supposed to be there for those, holding a cake with far too many candles, singing off-key with the people you love. So I did the next best thing. I called in the expert, my very own partner in crime, my best friend Chloe. She was more than a friend. She was the sister I never had, the keeper of my secrets since we were awkward teenagers with braces and bad haircuts. Chloe was the obvious choice. She knew Mark almost as well as I did. She understood his quiet sense of humor, his love for vintage records, and his secret soft spot for carrot cake. I trusted her completely, implicitly, without a single shred of doubt. The plan was simple, yet perfect. While I was in another city, negotiating contracts and sitting through mind-numbing presentations, Chloe would orchestrate the ultimate surprise. She would gather our closest friends at our favorite little Italian restaurant downtown. She would make sure his favorite wine was on the table, and that the carrot cake from that specific bakery he loved was waiting. I gave her my credit card and the key to our house, just in case. The trust I placed in them both was absolute, a foundational pillar of my life. Mark was my rock, my steady, predictable husband of 10 years. Our life was comfortable, a gentle rhythm of shared jokes, weeknight dinners, and future plans sketched out in soft pencil. And Chloe? She was my other half, the person I called before I even called my own mother. The idea that either of them could hurt me was unthinkable. A plot from a soap opera, not something that could ever touch the carefully constructed reality of my world. The thought was so foreign, so utterly absurd, that it never once crossed my mind as I boarded that plane. I imagined the scene playing out from hundreds of miles away. I saw Mark walking into the restaurant, his face breaking into a slow, surprised smile. I saw our friends yelling, "Surprise!" and Chloe standing there, beaming, a glass of champagne in her hand, proud of her successful mission. I even planned my own call for later that evening, ready to hear the joy in his voice, to listen to him recount every detail. I was so wrapped up in the fantasy of this perfect, selfless gesture that I was completely blind to the dark, ugly truth that was already beginning to fester in the very home I had asked her to help protect. When I returned home a few days later, the air was different. The welcome was not what I expected. Mark was distant, his hugs were stiff, and his eyes wouldn't quite meet mine. He was angry, but it was a strange, simmering anger that he couldn't seem to explain. He said the party was fine, a word so bland and lifeless it felt like a slap. When I pressed for details, he would just shrug and change the subject, his jaw tight. He claimed he was just tired, stressed from work. But I knew my husband. This was something else entirely. A wall he had built between us that I couldn't see but could definitely feel. My calls to Chloe went unanswered. This was unusual, to say the least. We spoke almost every day, our conversations a constant stream of consciousness about everything and nothing. Now there was only silence. I left voicemails, sent texts filled with question marks, asking her how the party went, asking if Mark had a good time, asking if she was okay. Each unanswered message felt like a small, sharp prick of anxiety. It was a deafening silence from the one person whose voice had always been a source of comfort and clarity. I started to wonder if they had argued, if something had gone wrong at the party to create this rift between them. The tension in our house grew thicker with each passing day. It was a quiet, suffocating thing that filled the spaces in our conversations. Mark would retreat to his study for hours, and I would find myself wandering through the rooms of our home, feeling like a stranger. I tried to initiate conversations, to break through the icy barrier he had erected. I suggested a date night, a weekend away, anything to reconnect. Each suggestion was met with a non-committal grunt or a vague excuse. The man I had married was disappearing before my very eyes, replaced by a moody, secretive stranger who barely looked at me. I replayed everything in my mind, searching for a clue I might have missed. Did I say something wrong on the phone? Did the business trip upset him more than I realized? I started to craft narratives in my head to explain the bizarre behavior. Maybe Mark was mad that I wasn't there in person. Maybe Chloe felt I had put too much pressure on her. I felt a growing sense of panic, a desperate need to understand what had happened in my absence. The truth, when it finally came, would be far more destructive than any scenario my worried mind could have possibly invented. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the kitchen, trying to lose myself in the mundane task of chopping vegetables for dinner, when my phone buzzed on the counter. It was Chloe. A wave of relief washed over me. Finally, I thought, she's calling me back. Finally, I'll get some answers. I picked up the phone, ready to launch into a dozen questions, but I didn't get the chance. Her voice was small and shaky, not the confident, booming voice I knew so well. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask how I was. She just started talking, her words tumbling out in a rushed, desperate whisper that made the hair on my arm stand on end. She told me she was pregnant. For a split second, I felt a surge of happiness for her, a reflexive joy for my best friend. But then came the rest of it. The words that followed were like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs and sending the chopping knife clattering to the floor. She wasn't just pregnant. The baby wasn't from a new relationship I didn't know about. She told me it happened the night of Mark's birthday party, after the guests left, after they'd had too much wine. She said it was a mistake, a horrible, unforgivable mistake. And then she said the words that shattered my world into a million tiny, irreparable pieces. "I'm asking him to be a father to our child," she whispered, her voice cracking with a strange mix of fear and resolve. I couldn't process it. My mind refused to connect the dots. Mark? My Mark and Chloe? My Chloe? The two people I loved and trusted most in the world. It felt like a scene from a nightmare, a surreal, twisted joke. I stood frozen in my kitchen, the smell of onions sharp in the air, a silent scream trapped in my throat, the world tilted on its axis, and everything I believed to be true, everything that was solid and real, dissolved into chaos. The silence on my end of the line must have been terrifying for her, but I was incapable of speech. I was drowning in a flood of emotions, shock, white-hot anger, and a profound, cavernous hurt that seemed to open up inside my chest. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a conspiracy. They had both looked me in the eye for days, their faces masks of normalcy, while this colossal secret festered between them. The surprise party, my thoughtful gesture of love from afar, had become the stage for my own life's greatest tragedy. I finally found my voice, but all that came out was a choked, hollow whisper. What? Mark's confession was a pathetic, fumbling mess. When I confronted him, his anger finally broke, replaced by a wave of shame. He couldn't look at me. He stared at the floor, at his hands, anywhere but at my face. He said he was angry that I was away. He said he felt lonely and abandoned on his milestone birthday. He told me Chloe had stayed behind to help clean up, and they had opened another bottle of wine. He painted it as a moment of weakness, a stupid, drunken mistake that meant nothing. He swore it only happened once, but his words were meaningless noise against the roaring in my ears. A mistake doesn't result in a baby. The devastation is an ocean and I am lost in it. Every memory I have is now tainted. Every shared laugh with Chloe, every intimate moment with Mark. Was this the first time? How long had this been going on beneath the surface of our perfect lives? The betrayal is twofold, a dagger twisted by two sets of hands. My best friend, the one who held my hand through every crisis, has stolen my husband and my future. And my husband, the man who vowed to love and protect me, has broken every promise he ever made, creating a new life with the one person I thought I could always count on. How do you trust again after something like this? The very concept of trust feels like a cruel joke. If you cannot trust your husband of a decade, and you cannot trust the friend who's been by your side for 20 years, who is left? The foundation of my life has been ripped out from under me, and I am in a free fall. I look at my wedding photos on the wall, and I see 3 smiling faces, a happy couple and the maid of honor standing proudly beside them. It all feels like a lie now. A performance for an audience that didn't know the actors were hiding such a dark script. I don't know what to do next. Do I leave? Do I stay and fight for a marriage that is already a ghost? How can I ever look at either of them again without seeing this betrayal? Chloe is pregnant with my husband's child. That is a fact that cannot be undone. It is a permanent, living, breathing reminder of their deceit. My home feels like a crime scene, and I am the sole bewildered witness to the destruction. The future I had so carefully planned is gone, replaced by a vast, terrifying emptiness filled with questions that have no answers.